well, in August, I was in Washington, D.C., invited by Callie Means, who is the guy who works for Kennedy. But he was saying there that the chronic diseases in children have hit 55%.
You're listening to How I Grow This, exploring stories of gardeners from across the globe as we learn from their biggest tips and tricks to some of the things not to do. I'm your host, Luke Hammond. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the How I Grow This podcast. I'm your host, Luke Hammond. Today, I'm joined with the founder of Azure Standard. Many of you are probably familiar with Azure Standard, or maybe you've seen the trends across social media of all these people bringing in these hauls of amazing organic bulk foods and pretty much everything now from this company in parking lots or churches. And you're like, well, what is this company that is kind of changing the way food and organic food is being sourced? That's David Stelzer with Azure Standard. David, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, I want to kind of dive into food specifically with you because you're kind of the organic food guy. You're like the OG, the original organic food guy, long before it was cool or trendy or anything like that. Tell me what kind of got you into the organic food movement? Or I guess you're kind of one of the founders of the organic food movement before it was even organic, right? Before it was a thing.
Yeah, there wasn't even certification when we started switching, when we moved to organic. But really, the organic started more with my dad than with me. But when I was very young, I had a lot of health issues. And make a long story short, my parents did not want to abandon me as being a hopeless cause, which the medical establishment had done. And so they found a naturopath that gave some diet guidelines that was able to get me well. That kind of started the journey of my parents toward realizing that food is a big player in health. A lot of people don't make that connection right out the gate. So Dad was a farmer, conventional farmer like everybody else at the time. This is, so, but after realizing that food made such a huge difference in health, he began to look at, the health of the food that he was growing. And he ended up running across a book called Silent Spring. This was written by, I think, Rachel Carson, was back in the late 60s, early 70s, mostly about DDT at the time. But it was talking about the dangers of herbicides and pesticides and how poorly tested they are before they hit the marketplace. And that book eventually led to the very serious regulation of DDT, which before that was just sprayed everywhere.
Can you describe what DDT was used for? If we do have younger audiences, this is all before their time. If they're not as obsessed with this sort of thing, they may not have, they're like, what is DDT? What is this?
It was a chemical that was used primarily for control of insects. And it pretty much killed every insect of any sort. It was very, very toxic to insects. And, but there were not a lot of immediate effects on people when the effects were a lot slower. But the effects were showing up in birds first. So as birds were eating insects that had been died from DDT, or they were getting the DDT as they were going through, the bird eggs were so thin that the mother was crushing the eggs. It was creating other side effects in birds, hence the name Silent Spring in that book. There would be no more birds if we would continue down that phase.
Gotcha. Spring is in the season, not spring is in the water bubbling out of the ground.
Right,
Gotcha.
right. That was the metaphor to the title of the book. Was it was going to be a silent spring. There was going to be no mating birds anymore because there would be no birds. in agricultural areas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they were using it other places too. I mean, DDT was used big time in the subtropics. They claim they got malaria under control with DDT. It was considered to be the miracle chemical. Put DDT in all the swamps. Turns out all those, aquas birds were dying. But the thing was, it was also causing a lot of reproductive harm on humans as well.
Mm-hmm.
That was some of the early phases of um, autoimmune type disorders. Now, I mean, they replaced DDT with things even worse, and we still have, from that time to now, I mean, we've gotten a lot less healthy, but it was the first book that actually brought that to the forefront.
Okay.
So anyway, that was kind of what opened my dad's eyes a little bit to this. Then he was out right after that, and he was planting wheat, and he was up to his armpits in this pink wheat that he had gotten from the seed company to plant. It was treated, and they made it pink because it's so toxic that they didn't want anyone to accidentally eat it. So they passed a law that you have to dye the wheat pink, so everyone knows that it's not, just wheat. And so he was up to his armpits in that, and so he calls the seed company and asks, "What's in the treating that you're going to put on the wheat?" And they didn't know, and so they went down and started calling people because he was insisting that he knows. Turns out that the primary active ingredient was mercury. So he was up to his armpits basically in mercury dust. And, planting that wheat, spreading it out in his drill boxes and all that kind of stuff. And that's when he came to the conclusion, yeah. And then he started looking up what the side effects of mercury toxicity is, and it's horrible. Mercury stays in the system for a lot. Well, we know about mercury heavy metal poisoning. That I mean, that's a well-known thing now. But and so why were we putting the treating on the seed to begin with? What was the necessity of it? It turns out that the seed companies were doing it because of a disease called smut in wheat. It's a fungal disease that makes the heads kind of shrivel up and turn black on some of the tillers on a stalk of wheat. But we have never. So that was the last time Dad ever used treated wheat, or we've ever used treated wheat on this farm. That was in 1973. We've never seen smut before nor since. We're too dry. It doesn't really grow here. The fungus doesn't grow here. So we were treating with a toxic chemical for a disease that doesn't even exist in our area. That's where we really, Dad really began to realize, hey, this is just, we need to be very deliberate about what we do on our farm and in our fields. And that was when we came to the conclusion, and, that Dad used to always say right after that, he would say all the time, says, yeah, the farmer is the guardian of the nation's health. Well, if that's really true, then it's very important what, as farmers, that we put on our fields and what we put on the crops. And but in real farming, and I know this maybe is a little bit more of a gardening thing, but we talk, the average farmer, he holds out both hands and he says, how much? How much do I have to pay for tractors, for fuel, for taxes, all this stuff on one hand? The other hand he holds out and he says, how much will you give me for my wheat or my beef or whatever? That price is set by the Chicago Board of Trade or the Iowa Beef Council or something else. He has no control over that unless he's a market gardener like like you guys do.
Yeah.
But then you can set your price whatever you want on the retail level. But most farmers don't have that. The only thing they then can control is the quantity.
Hmm.
So when quantity is the only thing we're growing, quality begins to suffer
Mm.
because you're only after quantity. You don't care
Hmm.
about the quality. And that's where all these it becomes this chemical hodgepodge soup because the farmer's not being paid for healthy food. He's being paid for tons of wheat. He
Yeah.
doesn't even see it as food.
Right. There's a lot of, I think, probably in the last, correct me if I'm wrong, you know the world a whole lot better than me, but there's been an initiative to try and transition some of that in terms of the grading of fresh fruits and vegetables at larger scales. I mean, everything, is graded on look and image and sellability for the store more than it is um, nutrient content. I'm pretty sure there's like next to no nutrient content grading out there yet. I know some people and some small factions within our communities are trying to work on that, and what does that look like and how can we prove nutrient density? Um,
Mm-hmm.
let's kind of weave into a nutrient density conversation, because we have this farmer that's struggling and it's all going towards quantity because that's what he gets paid for because he's got to keep the lights on in his own home and feed his kids. And then we have this um, American people that has over the last several decades gotten um, more and more and more unhealthy. A huge rise of autoimmune disease and things that can't track, and bodies not keeping up, and diabetes and obesity rampant and through the roof across all people. It's not just isolated. Um,
Well, I was just in August I was in Washington D.C. Um, and invited by Callie Means, who is the guy who works for Kennedy,
mhm,
and because he put together a couple of panels, or their team did, on regenerative agriculture, which I was invited to be a part of. But he was saying there that the chronic diseases in children, this is 18 and under, have hit 55% of children are diagnosed with some kind of a chronic disease.
all right, people,
Up,
let that sink in. 55%. If you have
that's
two
what he
kids,
said.
if you have two kids, one of your
But
kids
if,
is going to have a chronic disease.
well,
I mean, maybe,
statistically, but that's not true if you
right,
actually feed them right. I mean, I had
right,
11
right,
kids and we have no chronic diseases in 11. So statistically, we should have had six, but
right.
statistics are not what makes this happen. It's how you feed your kids.
Mm.
And it's the lifestyle of it's food and lifestyle. And he was saying just 50 years ago, so this would have been about the time Dad started farming organically, actually, just a little bit after that.
Hmm.
That number was 5% of 18 and under had a chronic disease diagnosis. So it has gone from 5% to 55% in 50 years.
That's not great math.
That is not good math, and it does not bode well for the future economy of this country. This is in the U.S. He's in
Right,
Kennedy's, so they're
right.
just doing U.S. stuff. That may not be worldwide.
Well, that means you have, I mean, without getting political, it just means you have next to no labor force. It means you have next to no military. It means you have next to no police. It means I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yes, exactly. And it doesn't mean that every single person that has some kind of a chronic disease diagnosis absolutely can't work. That's not the case. A lot of these are diagnoses of things like, type 2 diabetes and things like that, that people actually live with and work with and,
Hmm.
maybe even have children with, or some kind of an autoimmune disorder, like they have celiac disease and they can't eat anything with gluten in it, but they can still,
Hmm.
if they live their special diets, they can live a productive life, kind of,
Right.
you know. This is not, but you're absolutely right. It's very hard to find enough very fit people for things like the military or, hard labor jobs where you have to be
Hmm.
in really good shape. when you have such a contracted labor pool. So that's from from an economic standpoint. But when
Mm,
you think about it from a human suffering standpoint,
mm,
that's where it really breaks my heart,
mm,
because you think about that, children that cannot be children the way that children should be. Children should be out running in the fields and climbing trees and riding their bikes and climbing through fences and all the stuff that kids do. This is not, healthy kids do. Now they don't feel good enough and they're sitting on their couch watching their video games, and it's just making it that much worse, because
mm,
that fresh air and exercise and getting in the dirt and all that stuff is what makes a kid's immune system really kick in and do what it's supposed to do and keep them healthy.
mm,
So food is a very, very important part of that. Diet, you know, and then getting into nutrient dense. I'd like to, and that's a big part of it, because they're not getting the nutrients that we need for healthy bodies.
mm,
And I can hit that from a couple of different angles. Um, One is the the nutrient quality of the food that we're getting. And so, we looked at the amino acid makeup of protein.
mhm,
Now, wheat is a pretty good high source of protein. Runs about 14% protein, right?
mhm,
Give or take a little bit, depending on the variety. So traditionally, wheat has been one of the foundational foods for society. About 14% protein, pretty high in carbohydrates, got a lot of energy in it. Um, a fair amount of fiber, unless you take the bran out too. That's why civilizations were built on wheat. But then in the 50s, we had what we called the Green Revolution. It was anything but green.
mm,
But what ended up happening is they learned about anhydrous ammonia, or ammonia type fertilizers, and they couldn't really use them on wheat, because wheat would, if they used anhydrous, it would grow too tall and it would tip over and they couldn't harvest it, and the crop would be worse than it was if they didn't use any of the chemical fertilizers, i.e., not all fertilizers, but especially about the ammonia fertilizers. So farmers began, they didn't do that. So the Green Revolution, a couple of scientists came in and they developed varieties of wheat that were what is called semi-dwarf. So they grow way shorter and they have a little thicker stalk. And now the farmers can go in out using those varieties and they can put on a lot of anhydrous ammonia. Most of them around here put on between 1 and 200 pounds per acre of anhydrous ammonia on, to grow their wheat crop. Well, that increases the bulk yield, but the problem is that in nature, nitrogen is the growth regulator. It's one of the hardest things for the microbes to convert. There's tremendous amounts of nitrogen. The air is loaded with nitrogen. There is no shortage whatsoever of nitrogen, but to make that utilizable for a plant, there has to be a certain amount of microbial action that comes on. I mean, legumes are obviously the gardener's go-to for that, because legumes have they host nitrogen fixing bacteria better than grasses do. Now, there are ones that grasses host as well, but legumes are classic. You can inoculate your peas or whatever with a little bit of bacteria, and actually it'll grow in your soil naturally after you've grown peas there a few times. And you dig up your pea root, and there's these little itty bitty nodules that are attached to the roots. All you gardeners have seen this, right? Peas, clovers, things like that. And that's actually colonies of the bacteria that converts air into utilizable nitrates for the plant. Well, and that's how nature makes it to do that. Grasses, they're so small you can't see it with the naked eye, but grasses do that to some degree as well. There are microbes that do that. So nature made it so that you had to have the nitrogen converted by microbes in order for the plant to get more mass. If the microbes are present in the soil, they're converting more than just nitrogen. They're also converting the rest of the some 72 minerals and nutrients that we need for good health. By shortcutting that process, so now you're putting an ammonia on the ground that the plant thinks is nitrogen. It's not converted by microbes. The rest of the nutrients in the soil are not being converted because the microbes aren't present. You don't have to have the microbes present to think that the plant has all those things. The average grain grower they only use 3 nutrients, NPK. That's all the stuff they look at, and most of them only look at N. That's because it's the growth regulator. So if you actually take that to harvest, now you have wheat that has way more nitrogen in the form of ammonia, and so it grows really big, but it's nutrient deficient on the rest. So when the protein begins to form, it only really is able to form pretty much one amino acid. And healthy wheat should have at least 12 amino acids in the amino acid chain. You understand how proteins work with amino acid chains, as far as most listeners probably got that in, middle school science or early high school science. But, those chains form to create a protein. And based on the way they are formed, bases what kind of protein that can be. There are proteins that are absolute poisons if the chain is connected in just the wrong way, right? So using 22 amino acids that are done in all these different ways to all this makeup to create the various ones. The thing about it is the wheat can really only produce L-glutamine using the anhydrous ammonia. The rest of the protein in the amino acid chains and a certain amount of glutathione. So you have L-glutamine and glutathione. That's the basic makeup of what we know as gluten. The other amino acids in that chain are for the most part missing. Traditionally, ancient grains and before using ammonias, those amino acids were a complete chain. Yes, there was some glutathione, L-glutamine, but it was in balance with a whole bunch of other amino acids. Our bodies can't use 2 amino acids to make muscles and the other things that we need protein for. That's what most of our tissue is made out of that's in our body. It's all protein based. So when you go to a lab and you test for protein, that conventional wheat that still has the same amount of protein. So it's still sitting at 14% protein, but it really only has 2 amino acids.
Right. It's one measure or one indicator of a totally incomplete picture.
Exactly. Yeah. So you say, oh, well, so the media will come on, oh, organic wheat's no higher in protein than conventional wheat. No, it's not. But it's all about balance. Balance is extremely important when it comes to things like these macronutrients.
Right.
So I just wanted to point out that eventually our bodies say, no more. And that's when we have celiac disease and other things. And suddenly we have people that can't use wheat anymore. And as a species, we've been eating wheat for 4,000 years at least, maybe longer. That, according to archaeology, civilization was built on wheat. Wheat and lentils were the first 2 domesticated crops, right? It's like, hello.
Something's going on here. Something is afoot.
That's right.
So if we're beginning to look at, this is the same concept. We've been talking about wheat, but it translates into every different vegetable crop, every different tree, every different food system. what is the key advantages somebody would have nutritionally from harvesting food from their own garden in their backyard? What are the top three things that come to mind for you for just human health?
Human health, number one is if it's in your own garden, and I'm not saying that every garden is perfect. Now, let's be really clear about this. A lot of us have been fed a line about even if we raise our own garden. I've, you know, Azure off, sometimes not so much anymore, but, we've sometimes sold organic produce that was not necessarily certified because it's from really small farmers, and we're not able to do much of that anymore. The limit is so low these days. But I've talked to so many farmers because I go do and I question. And on more than one occasion, I know this one, I think I'll mention here, there was this garlic grower, he wanted to sell me garlic. And I was going down kind of my list. Well, what'd you put on? What'd you use for fertilizer? Oh, it's like steer manure and this. No, okay. And so how did you have to plant that in the fall. How do you control like the noxious weeds and the grasses and stuff like that? And he said, oh, well, I just spray Roundup on in the fall right before I plant my garlic
Yeah.
so that all that stuff is killed and I have a really good seed bed for the garlic. And he absolutely genuinely thought that he was raising organic garlic because he was using steer manure as his fertilizer. So be careful in your gardens even. If you're using weed and feed, it's maybe that's in your lawn, but and then you put your garden there next year, that soil has a long ways to go.
Ye-
Just to throw that out there to start with.
Right. Yeah. I, I guess a key factor would be what you've put in it, but the question you might want to ask is, do you know what you put in it and whether or not you that's a good
Do you
thing.
know what's in the things that you know you put in it?
Right. You should
So
know what you put in it. Again, I guess you have the control of asking about some of these sources. You can ask, okay, well, what was fed through the steers in the steer manure? Is it loaded with ivermectin? Is it loaded with other kinds of medications? What was the condition of that manure? Was it aged? All those questions
yeah,
you can
they
begin
come
to
from a
ask.
feedlot. Yeah.
Right, right.
So it's worth knowing where that is. Now, if you have your own chickens and you're putting your own chicken manure on your garden from your own chicken house that you know where the feed, that's a whole different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're composting from your own kitchen table scraps again. And that's the ideal world where you
Mm-hmm.
absolutely know what you're putting on your garden.
Mm-hmm.
But assuming that you know what you're putting on your garden and you're putting those kinds of things on your garden,
Right.
along with maybe things like liquid fish that comes from the ocean, that's pretty good. That's one of my favorite go-tos for gardeners that don't know a lot. I'll tell them
Mm-hmm.
use liquid fish because it comes from the ocean. It's pretty, it's clean, and
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't take, you're not going to completely mess your soil up by applying it incorrectly without doing soil tests.
Right. Right.
But when you really think about it, the advantage is getting it out of your own garden. You absolutely and utterly know exactly where that food came from.
Mm-hmm.
It did not, there's no chance of mix up. There's no chance of, you know, toxics, anything being on that because you controlled it
Mm-hmm.
from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of that is that um, freshness is such an imperative thing when it comes to the enzymes and stuff for digestion. If you're picking it straight out of your garden and taking it to your kitchen table, there nobody can get as fresh a produce as that.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how hard we try. And I'm a commercial grower too. We grow a lot of produce.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we have the best of the best of the best. but
Hmm.
I still can't get it to you as fast as you can get it to your table from your garden.
Right.
It's not possible.
Right.
And the enzymes, and again, a lot of things keep well, and there's a certain amount of breakdown, but remember the enzymes are key.
For the most part, um, as this being a gardening podcast, and we want everyone to be growing the majority of their vegetables in things that break down, the low shelf life products, we want them growing that in their backyard. Um, let's talk about the nutrient quality and storage quality of things that are specifically geared towards being a storage product. Um, I'm thinking our grains, our dry beans, our nuts, um, even potatoes. I would ask, the
Mm-hmm.
questions of the nutrient density regarding some of those storage products, because that's kind of where I lean on Azure. I see a little jar behind you of, I think, Brazil nuts. Kind of hard to see, but it looks like there's a jar of Brazil nuts back there. Um,
Actually, it's olives that just came, I think. I have.
no, right next to that. What's in that other jar right
Oh,
there?
that's some dried apples,
Oh,
actually.
okay, even better.
Sorry.
It looks kind of like Brazil nuts, but like, what is kind of the nutrient storage within some of the storage crops?
Um, so again, the storage crops are these crops that, and a lot of the storage crops are ones that are a lot harder to do in your garden. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
excepting potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Potatoes and onions are
Mm-hmm.
relatively easy to grow in a garden.
Yeah, beets, carrots can kind of store longer, but
Yeah,
it's not going to be as fresh. There's a curve somewhere.
absolutely. Yeah. Beets, carrots, onions, potatoes. Um, but when you get into the grains, I think from a nutrient dense standpoint, what I just talked to you about is true of with wheat,
Mm-hmm.
is true of almost all of those grains.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the cool things about that is when you're working with organic product, and that's why of those storage items, um, for my family, um, I would never feed my family any of those things that was not at a minimum organic. And of course, Azure spends a lot of time going a little bit beyond and making sure that these
Mm-hmm.
farmers are also not necessarily certified regenerative, but have regenerative practices
Yeah.
in their farming methods. Be-
Let's talk about that. What is your process for picking a farm? Looking into this. I'm sure that's changed over the last 40 years. Standards have changed. You've changed. The questions that are being asked. What does that look like for you?
well, I mean, yeah, that's a big part of it. And most of that, organic certification is minimum. So
Mm-hmm.
we do look at organic certification now because we are a certified entity, and I can't really do a lot of these mom and pops anymore because
Mm-hmm.
um, you can't really put that green USDA seal on that stuff anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And we use that. So that's a step in the right direction. But really, what organic is, it's about what's not in your food, not about
Mm-hmm.
what is in your food.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to look at both sides. So I pretty well trust. I'm not saying there's never an error or it's never cheated, but it's very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the organic certification tells you what's not in your food. You don't have the ammonia fertilizers that I was just talking about,
Mm-hmm.
not allowed. You don't have the glyphosates or the Roundup, not
Mm-hmm.
allowed. You don't have the 2,4-D, the Agent Orange, um,
Mm-hmm.
under a new name, um, in the food. It's all stuff that's not allowed. You don't have any insecticides like the DDT type stuff, although that particular one's been outlawed in the US. There's plenty of them that have taken its place. Malathion, I guess, is probably at the top of that list. Um, those are all not allowed in organics
Mm-hmm.
and really can't be cheated on.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody would see if somebody sprayed Roundup out there on an organic farm when the inspector walked on, they would see it not instant. Leaves a big brown streak, right? I mean, you can't hide it. Same with anhydrous, ammonia type stuff. So organic, that tells you what's not in your food. Now, what it doesn't do really is tell you what's in your food.
Mm.
How do you know that the farmer is feeding his soil? I mean, he could be just farming organically by neglect. Now, I have seen that. I can't say that I know how they stay in business very long because, you're basically pushing your yields down to the lowest common denominator. And, I had a grower in Idaho. I was just not that long ago that, yeah, he's doing organic farming, but more or less farming, organic by neglect. And he's got vast acreages and, with the higher organic prices, he was growing grain, it all comes out in the wash. He doesn't use the chemicals and gets a higher price and, it's kind of a dry area and it is what it is. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really care. And it looks better. So he feels better about doing it that way. But when you're really, most organic farmers, I think, do not do it that way because they wouldn't stay in business very long unless they have a unique situation like that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be looking at the mineralization of your soil, at the balance in your soil. You have to be biological farmers. You're growing the microbes in your soil.
Mm-hmm.
And most organic farmers that do this at any kind of scale, you're actually doing a lot more testing and stuff than a gardener could do or a conventional farmer, either one.
Mm-hmm.
You're, I mean, on our farm, I don't know if you do the same thing, but obviously soil testing happens every single year, almost on every field and every plot and every different soil type. We're looking at that in a very specific way. We're looking at our cation exchange, how that works. In other words, how the oxygen is working with the nutrients to make it bioavailable to the plant. Um, we're also doing tissue sampling at a very, very regular basis. You take, you know, um, and maybe someone's already explained this on this show, but um, in a plant, in the tissue test, you take the growth tip leaf and the end of life leaf of that plant. Ideally, the same plant or same basic sample of plants. And then you test those against each other for the basic mineral content. And if you see very high minerals in the dying leaf versus the growth tip, you have an overabundance of that mineral, and you probably need to work on the corresponding minerals that make up the balance for that,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is like calcium and magnesium are partners. So if the magnesium's too high in the dying leaf, you need to add calcium. You can't take things out of the soil very easy. You can add so you might put on some foliar calcium to take that to a better place in the nutrient scale. If it's the other way around and the growth tip is higher than the dying leaf substantially, then you know that you have a deficiency of that nutrient.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you can put on, during the growth season. And so that basically before that plant begins to show signs of stress that you can see with the naked eye, by the time that happens, especially here in northern climates, you've mostly lost a good chunk of your growing season because it can take a few weeks
Mm-hmm.
for that to show up, i.e., you start seeing some yellow tips or yellow streaks in the veins. Oh, I know I have a calcium deficiency, or the stems are hollow. That's a
Mm-hmm.
calcium deficiency in a lot of plants. You get a very, almost no pith whatsoever in the stem. Then you know that you're calcium. But by the time that begins to develop in the plant, you're 2 weeks too late to
Mm-hmm.
actually. So by doing this testing up front, then we're able to anticipate what we would probably see in a couple of weeks from with the naked eye
Mm-hmm.
in the field. So those are the kind of things that as organic farmers that become looking at regenerative practices, these are the things that we do. I mean, we do them, you probably do them, probably anyone who is really cares about the regenerative quality of their food is going to do these are the kinds of things. So these are the things I ask about when I'm working with a grower.
Hmm.
What kinds of things do you do for your nutrient? How do you test your nutrients? What kind of soil test do you use? What kind of, how do you work with the nutrient content of your soil? And if they're telling me about things like what I just described to you, then I know that they're paying attention.
Uh-huh.
I know that they're paying attention to the quality of the food that they're producing because they're paying attention to the health of the bacteria and microlife that's in the soil. If they're
Uh-huh.
doing that, the microlife will feed the plant at the right balance. So if
Uh-huh.
the farmer's talking about those things, then I trust his food.
Mm.
If he just says, "Oh yeah, I just went down to the local, you know, agrochemical company and I asked them for the organic fertilizer to replace the conventional that I used to use," then it's kind of like, well, that farmer probably is not the one I want to be using here.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know you're familiar with John Kempf and Advancing Eco Ag, and you just described, kind of the big two, soil testing and tissue analysis that pretty technical growers are beginning to use as data points. There's this third data point that people are using. Have you been playing around with SAP analysis at all?
We have, yeah.
And as you begin to merge all these data points, people go, wow, that's so costly. That's an expensive test. These are expensive tests. You're doing it regularly. What kind of value have you seen from going through that extra effort and process of doing soil, doing tissue, doing sap, and trying to kind of figure out this nutrient density standpoint from the health of a plant?
Well, I think it's absolutely key. It's
Hmm.
key to, and it's not like we've never had a problem anymore after, starting down these paths.
Hmm.
I mean, there's still things that happen every once in a while. I mean, something comes out of left field that I just had some powdery mildew on grapes this year. I don't know where it came from, but we will know next year.
Hmm.
We will figure it out because
Hmm.
obviously they did not get the resistance that they need from the soil.
Hmm.
And I know that. And, so
Let's talk.
that's kind of a place would use SAP analysis to try to determine those.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about that and dive into the powdery mildew. And specifically in this podcast, we always go to people's growing context because people see stuff on the internet and they're trying to follow somebody from somewhere that's telling them exactly when to plant or what to add to their soil. And um and they kind of misjudge their context in their growing zone. So where are you located? Where is your farm? What are your growing conditions? Just kind of outline a little bit of that for people.
Yeah, we're right on the 45th parallel.
Okay.
Um, so, um, I guess exactly in the middle of the temperate climate zone.
Uh-huh.
Um, we have, we don't have, all of our land is not at the same elevation. We have multiple elevations. My home farm's at about 2,500 feet. I have farms as low as 1,000 feet.
Mhm.
And so we do see some differences there.
Mhm.
Um, we're a little bit more on the dry side. Our farms range from our highest rainfall farm is about 16 inches of precipitation per year. Our lowest is about 9 inches
Mhm.
of precipitation per year. We do have some irrigation.
Mhm.
So irrigated crops and dryland crops are treated quite differently.
Mhm.
On dryland crops, you're looking a lot more at your cation exchange. In other words, the amount of oxygen that's going into the soil. You're looking at things like compaction and stuff a lot more. With irrigated crops, there's a lot more forgiveness,
Mhm.
um, just for what it's worth. And you also have cover crop opportunities with irrigated crops that you would never have with dryland crops. And dryland crops, you do not have, at least around here, there's no opportunity for cover crops. That's not a thing you can do.
Yeah. Maybe you could dabble in it, but your timing better be perfect to the weather. And
And you better pray for rain in a big way.
yep. Yep.
Because, yeah, it's very, very difficult to do at scale
Yes.
any kind of cover crop thing, and you're
Yeah.
in a dry area too, so
Mm-hmm.
if you're not being irrigated, how much can you do? Pretty limited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're looking at a rain event this weekend, and I am irrigated, but we are looking at a rain event, and uh, I went out and drilled everything I had to get my cover crop in before the rain event because it just hits differently when that rain comes than whether I irrigate
Mhm.
it. And so,
Mhm.
what crops are you going to be? Are you dry farming? Is that mostly wheat?
Well, it was wheat ground, so we initially did wheat,
Mm-hmm.
but over the years we've moved more to the ancient grains now,
Okay.
just because they're a little bit more tricky to grow, and I can buy wheat from other growers a lot more easily than the
Yeah.
ancient grains.
So
So
that's
we do a
einkorn and others.
spelt is
Mm-hmm.
we do a lot of spelt, quite a little bit of einkorn, Coruscant, Immer. Um, those are probably the big four on the grain side on the dry
Mm-hmm.
land.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
What are average yields per acre of those ancient grains?
well, it depends which one. It's now spelt. It produces almost as much as wheat, not quite.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were going to get on that same ground in our area, we probably get, 60 to 70 bushel per acre on wheat. On spelt, we can figure 45 to 50 bushel per acre on that same
Mm-hmm.
ground, same good stand. Einkorn is going to be more like 25 to 35 bushel per acre on that same
Mm-hmm.
ground. Coruscant is going to be 35 to 45 probably, as kind
Mm-hmm.
of as a ratio.
Yeah, and all these grains that are kind of hard to source in the States. You're probably one of the few places to source them. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I think there's a few places you can buy it, but Azure's been definitely a major source of, the ancient grains for quite
Mm-hmm.
a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And we had trouble keeping up, so I figured we'll grow the things that we need more of at Azure. So
Right.
spelt, here
Absolutely.
we come, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So at this point in 2026, going into it, or 2025, how many acres are you currently farming?
In grains or all together?
Altogether, and then in grains. Kind of
Yeah,
walk through your
uh,
program.
about 4,000 acres altogether.
Okay.
Grains is going to be probably almost 3,000 of that will be
Yeah.
going towards some sort of grain. And then probably the next biggest crops are tree fruit. We do a lot of, and this gets into our irrigated ground.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of cherries,
hence
sweet
the
cherries.
hence the cherry deal. I think this
Cherry
summer
deal every spring,
we
right? Or
saw
every
the
summer.
the cherry deal at the drop. Hey, there's an extra pallet here.
Yeah, well, yeah, because we were transitioning, and
Yeah.
we're still doing that. That orchard. So we have different pieces. We're transitioning. I still have one orchard, so we'll have this again one more
Mm-hmm.
year at least,
Mm-hmm.
um, of the cherry deal. But transitional cherries, they've been grown completely organically for 2 years, and now we're into year three.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to complete year three before you can technically certify them as organic. So this is, slightly less than 3 years since the last
Mm-hmm.
chemical application because we bought new orchards.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ran them into transition. We put all kinds of, this is where we really work on soil. Talk
Mm-hmm.
about soil tests and added microbes and all microbe
Mm-hmm.
flushes and all kinds of stuff when we're transitioning land. So I feel like those cherries are very healthy,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't really sell them as organic. And the conventional market is, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we have people kind of waiting in line for organic fruit, but transitional fruit has no value in, I shouldn't say no additional value in the marketplace. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what we were selling to Azure customers off the end of the truck doing cherry deals,
Mm-hmm.
because you're basically getting pretty much conventional prices for really top
High
notch
quality.
fruit.
Yeah.
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 Even though it hasn't met the full standards for organic. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll have our main orchard will be now transitioned, will be organic this next year, but I've still got I guess, about 70 acres that we're
Mm-hmm.
transitioning. So that will happen one more year.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I know a lot of people do enjoy the end of the truck deals. So how many drops are you at now?
About 4,200.
4,200 drops in all 50 states, correct? Or
That's right. All
and
50
uh,
states.
and the the life of a Azure driver, because that's a full time gig moving this food, right? You've
Yeah, so we have a little bit of a different model for most everything except right here on the West Coast. We have what we call a shuttle and delivery model. So we will run uh, the drivers that do the deliveries, and they have a little bit different lifestyle and need. These guys have to be, you know, they have to like to do customer service and need to know how to handle a truck well, but
Mhm,
they don't need to like to sit in the seat for, 4 or 5 hours at a time. They're
mhm,
going to be getting out every 15 or 20 minutes and opening the back of the truck and giving food to people and talking to folks, and
mhm,
then, and maybe maneuvering into tight spots pretty often and
mhm,
all of that. And so those guys typically they stay en route. So
mhm,
every time that they get empty, we have another truck waiting for them to refill their trailer. And we call those shuttles.
mhm,
And so those are the drivers that just like to go from point A to point B. So they load up here at our warehouse and they go and meet the delivery driver. We transfer the load onto the delivery truck, and then the delivery truck takes it from there, um, wherever they ended at the last drop.
mhm,
And those shuttle drivers typically, and a lot of those we actually use third party carriers. Those are not even all Azure drivers.
mm.
The delivery drivers, well, a couple of exceptions to that, but the vast majority of those are Azure employees
Yeah.
that that drive for Azure, and some of them live on the road more or less, but most of them are on a 3 week on, 1 week off type of schedule or something like that.
Mhm. I just think of the logistics that goes into your business, and my mind is just blown. I'm thinking 4,200 something drops happening every single month. All those trucks, all those states, all those people, all that food. It's like a grocery store on delivery. It's like a little Amazon in many ways, but very much mom and pop. And I just go, wow, you guys are awesome.
Oh, well, thank you.
So,
That has been a 35-year journey
mhm.
to make this happen, to create those logistics and all of those things.
So we only have a few minutes left, and I want to hear what are your guys' top products? You guys have so many different products. It's not just a bulk grain company. You have pretty much everything. But what are your top selling products?
Um, as categories, if I were to just take one individual product, it probably is in the grain or flour. I think our top number one product that we sell in pounds, at least, is the organic all-purpose flour. That's hit the top now. I think a lot because it works so well in the sourdough world. It's like
Ah,
the
there it is.
greatest sourdough flour on the market right now.
Yeah,
And so we're selling in pounds. That's number one.
gotcha.
But as far as in categories, um, it really is kind of all over the board. We don't
Mm,
we don't really have a category that outperforms everything else by a
gotcha.
huge margin. Produce is a big deal. We do sell a lot of produce. We get a
Mm-hmm.
semi load of potatoes in probably every other day,
Mm-hmm.
just, as a perspective from good organic farmers that we have asked those questions to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we do, um, a lot of apples this time of year, particularly,
Mm-hmm.
um, pears, things like that. Um, but grains definitely are at the top of the list. And then gardening products are really hot right now, especially things like, chicken feed. So we have several different brands of chicken feed that we sell,
Mm-hmm.
but we also sell all the ingredients for people who want to make their own. We have like 50-pound bags of chicken quality wheat, barley, peas, oats, Milo, corn, all those kinds of things that are top notch feed grains. So if people want to make their own or sprout their grains or whatever, we're selling a lot of pounds of that kind of stuff now. Dollar wise, I mean, the fastest growing right now is actually the supplement side.
Mm-hmm.
And the because we launched our own brand of supplements just because so many of the supplements were so bad, in the sense of fillers and not organic ingredients and just, we're trying to use these to get well and they're loaded with, they don't even know the difference between bioavailable minerals and non-bioavailable minerals because they can say it's that has that milligrams on the label because of the test. Back to what we were talking about with protein, you can
Mm-hmm.
do that with iron too. You can say it's iron. It's truthfully just an iron ferrite. It's basically rust, and you can put that on the label as iron.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your body can't use that. In fact, it might be damaging.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got into that space, and because these supplements are working very well, that's been a really probably the fastest growing segment here just recently. And then the canning jars have been just going crazy because you know we developed a canning jar that actually works. So for you gardeners that want to do canning, um, Ball and Kerr and all them got bought up by Rubbermaid basically, or Nival or something like that. And they don't really care about quality anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had heard from customers all the time, oh, I want a can, but every time I try to can, 3 or 4 jars break in every batch, and it's just a mess. And I get discouraged trying to can, and all the jars are breaking. And so we figured out that it doesn't have to be that way. We can have a good jar that doesn't break. And so we designed a jar that went up to 150 degree shock. It has to pass 150-degree shock test. So we have to go from um, basically from 50 to 200 and it not break.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able, so we developed a line. We've got like um, 10, 10, 10 different sizes now.
Wow.
Everything from half gallons down to half pints.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um, wide and narrow mouth canning jars, and they're really becoming a big deal because the competition still has jars that break, and
Right.
unless you're getting really old ones that were built like 20 years ago or older
Hmm.
that you still have. It's almost, unless you buy our jars, there isn't anything out there that really holds up to rigorous home canning.
Hmm. It's interesting. I'm trying to think that, my wife cans quite a bit. And obviously as a tomato farmer, right?
Mhm.
We've got the stock. So it's one of those, I'm trying to think if I've ever had a jar break, and I don't know if I have your jars, but I'm in. You sold me. I'm in.
Uh,
So
yeah,
cool.
and for you as a grower, the other coolest part about the jar is that you can put a label on it. So
Ah,
I don't know if you sell any at your little farm store and you can tomatoes,
I
but
don't yet, just because I don't. There's a challenge there, but
Yeah,
Not
I
yet,
know there's
but
probably some food safety loops you have to jump through.
there's a lot of legal.
You can do that, but this
Here, hold it. Yeah, there we go.
this jar, you can't really see it.
Very cool.
Very see this Azure jar here, but
Hmm.
this goes in instead of out. So the decoration that's on the canning jar,
Hmm.
it goes in, not out. So you can put the label right over the top of all that,
Oh, that's clever.
unlike any other canning jar. And so we started doing some of the stuff that we can
Hmm.
because we do the same thing, except we do it under a different label.
Hmm.
I don't know. Sweet Creek is one of the brands that Azure sells,
Hmm.
and so all the extra tomatoes and stuff that we have, we can as Sweet Creek
Oh, very cool.
and cucumbers. So it's
Hmm.
pickles and
Hmm.
tomato products and enchilada sauce and all that kind of stuff. So we did
Love it.
um, jalapenos, canned jalapenos, and a couple of jams.
Very
But
cool.
but I did that because we wanted to use our own canning jars for our canned
Right,
goods.
right. Well, David, thank you so much for this hour and being willing to meet and jump on this podcast. Where can people find out how like about you and or your company, and how do they sign up for a drop, and how does that whole thing work?
Well, that's all on AzureStandard.com. That's AzureStandard.com. It's the Azure Standard. And so you simply go to AzureStandard.com. Down in the footer, there's a link that says Find a Drop. So if you click on that link, you get a little map that pops up and it shows all the drops all over. So you can either put your zip code into that little map search, or you can just zoom out and find your location
Hmm.
and find the closest drop to you.
Hmm.
And then if you click on the blue button that shows these drops, once you get zoomed in a little bit, it'll bring up like an email or a phone number of the drop coordinator for that area. So you can also contact them if you would like to.
Hmm.
But basically, when you place an order on Azure, just like e-commerce, any other kind of e-commerce site, it's pretty simple and straightforward, except when you check out and you choose go to a drop on the checkout page. And then if you don't have one already in your system, it will pop that same map up and it'll ask you to choose which drop you want to go to. So
Hmm.
you just choose that drop, and then in a day or depending on how early you order, but when cutoff comes around and we know what how fast we can get to you, we will send you an email and say that will be there next Tuesday at 2 o'clock or whatever it is. I just
Hmm.
made that up. Um, and then you just, depending on what the drop is, but either you show up at the drop or you show up shortly thereafter. And depending, if you have any frozen, but Azure is able to deliver refrigerated items, produce items, cheeses, a lot of cheeses. Um, dollar wise, I forget you asked about top product. Dollar wise, it's actually cheese and butter
Hmm.
as a category for dollars. I gave you all the quantity ones, but cheese and butter is top dollar. And then we also have all the frozen goods. So you can buy frozen meats, breads, vegetables and fruits of all sorts.
Hmm.
You know, if you want to buy diced mango or pineapple or anything, we have sourced that from all over the world. Berries,
Awesome.
raspberries, blackberries, peas, broccoli, all the stuff, right?
Hmm.
And then, but just, if you get those things at the drop, just make sure that, you're going to be there before they start thawing because a lot of the drop points don't have freezer capacity,
Right.
especially in Arizona heat. Uh,
Yeah.
but anyway, um, so it's really straightforward and easy. It's just e-commerce with a home delivery, with a community drop point delivery back in, so you can feel good, and it stays within the Azure control the whole way.
Hmm.
We control the temperature chain, the chain of custody all the way from beginning to end. So it's not like it could be in a UPS truck and who knows what the temperature is and who knows what kind of chemicals was right next to it.
Mm.
We do know that. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's such a big dividing factor with some of the new ship to your door food systems that you don't really think about. That's right there. That's interesting.
And we are moving to what we're calling a drop to home. We have a lot of, probably the number one reason folks can't order from Azure, that the drop point doesn't have storage. They can't really show up on time because, both parents work or whatever, and it might be there during work hours, and they don't want to take a day off of work for Azure every month. And so, we're doing a pilot program right now, hope to launch it nationwide in the next 30 to 60 days, is going directly from drop. So recruiting somebody in the local community, it's so far in the tests, either a recently retired person that, is willing to spend an extra day delivering food around the community, or a 16-year-old that just got his driver's license and would love to drive around a little bit.
So it's like a little Uber or DoorDash,
little miniature, financially kind of like DoorDash for drop day.
Man, I think that is fantastic. I love that.
So we're trying to recruit some drivers now, but hopefully we'll be going, I'm giving a little bit of pre-launch here but we'll be going out nationally on that, with some direct marketing over the course before the end of the year.
Man, that's very cool. David with Azure Standard, thank you so much. Everybody, make sure you check out what they have, what's available, and take your health to the next level. Making sure that you are caring for your body, caring about what goes in your body. That's the first step of medicine is, what we eat probably 3 times a day. And I'm confessing I'm probably the worst, right? Maybe not the worst, but I have a lot of room to grow in that area. So make sure to hit the like and subscribe. Maybe share this episode with a friend. If you know that they order from Azure, they might enjoy this conversation that I just had. So share the How I Grow This podcast with a friend. Like it wherever you are consuming this product, whether that be on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, across the board. We just want to get the word out there that this podcast is here, and we are having conversations, talking about people and how they grow, what they grow, all around organic gardening. And I hope this was valuable. Thank you guys, and have a great rest of your day.